The story begins far away from the shining lights of Hollywood, in a small neighborhood in Manila, where the sound of jeepneys, barking dogs, and street vendors filled the air every morning. In one of those tiny houses, barely lit by a flickering bulb, lived a boy with a dream that was far bigger than the world he was born into. His name was Miguel, but everyone in the neighborhood called him Little Elvis. Maybe it was the way he combed his hair, maybe it was that deep voice that didn't belong to a kid his age, but every time he sang an Elvis Presley song, the whole street stopped to listen. He had one old speaker cracked on the sides, but that was all he needed. Every night, as his mother cooked dinner, Miguel would sing. His voice carried through the thin walls, spilling into the street, echoing off the tin roofs. The neighbors laughed at first, a Filipino boy trying to sound like Elvis. But slowly, those laughs turned into applause. People started gathering outside his window just to hear him practice. There was something magical about that voice. It wasn't imitation, it was passion, pain, and hope, all blended into something unforgettable. His mother worked long hours, sewing clothes to make ends meet, but she always had time to listen. She'd sit by the door, eyes glistening, and whisper, "One day, Anak, the world will hear you." He smiled every time, believing her even when life gave him no reason to. Then one afternoon everything changed. A letter arrived. It wasn't fancy, just a plain envelope with a logo that made Miguel's heart skip a beat. America's Got Talent. His hands shook as he opened it. It was real. He had been invited to audition. His mother screamed, hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. For a moment time stopped. The boy who sang on the rooftops of Manila was about to stand on one of the biggest stages in the world. They had no money for fancy clothes, so his mother took out an old white jacket and began stitching shiny fabric onto it, piece by piece, to make it look like an Elvis costume. She didn't sleep for nights sewing until her fingers bled, whispering prayers under her breath. Miguel packed his small bag, his dream folded inside. As he sat on the plane to Los Angeles, looking out at the clouds, he thought about all the nights he sang to the stars, wishing someone would hear him. Now, the stars were below him. When he stepped off the plane, everything felt like a dream. The bright lights, the fast cars, the air that smelled of opportunity, but deep down, he was scared. What if they laughed? What if he wasn't good enough? Still, he walked on, clutching the silver cross his mother gave him. He promised himself he would give everything he had on that stage. The day of the audition arrived. Backstage, he could hear the crowd cheering for the acts before him. Dancers, magicians, singers with big voices and perfect English. He stood quietly, his hands cold, staring at the massive stage ahead. Then he heard his name, the spotlight hit, and the crowd saw a small Filipino boy in a shiny Elvis outfit. Some people chuckled softly, others tilted their heads in curiosity. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, one eyebrow raised. He had seen hundreds of Elvis impersonators before. None ever truly impressed him. Miguel gripped the microphone. The lights dimmed. The music began. The first few notes of Can't Help Falling in Love. His heart raced, his throat dry. But then he remembered his mother's words, "Sing like it's your last chance." He opened his mouth, and everything changed. The first note was rich, deep, full of emotion. The audience went silent. That voice, it didn't sound like a child's. It carried weight, warmth, something timeless. Miguel's body moved naturally, every sway of his hip, every flick of his hand, confident yet humble. He wasn't copying Elvis, he was channeling him. But more than that, he was telling his own story through Elvis's song. As the song built, Heidi's mouth fell open. Sophia covered her heart. Simon's smirk disappeared. By the second verse, the crowd began to cheer. By the chorus, people were on their feet. His voice soared, and for a moment, it felt like the spirit of Elvis himself was standing on that stage, smiling down on this little boy from Manila. When the final note echoed across the theater, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the entire room exploded in applause. People screamed, some wiped their tears. Miguel stood frozen, overwhelmed. Then, a sound. Bang! The golden buzzer slammed down. Golden confetti rained from the ceiling like a dream coming to life. Miguel dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The music swelled, the crowd roared, and Simon stood up, clapping. For once, the man known for his cold critiques was speechless. He walked up to the stage, smiling. "You're the reincarnation of Elvis," he said. But with something Elvis never had. The soul of a fighter. Miguel tried to speak but couldn't. All he could whisper was, thank you so much." As the confetti fell, he looked up and whispered one more thing only he could hear, "Mama, we did it." That night, back home in Manila, his mother sat in front of an old TV watching her son's performance online. When the confetti fell on screen, she cried so hard she couldn't speak. The neighbors came running, cheering, clapping, laughing through tears. The boy they once called Little Elvis had become a global star overnight. By morning, his performance had millions of views. Headlines around the world read, "The Filipino Elvis who shocked AGT." Fans from every country filled the comments. Elvis would be proud. "This kid just revived real music. I cried watching this." Reaction videos flooded YouTube. People who had never heard of him were now calling him a legend. The video reached the top of trending lists. Even famous singers reposted it, calling his voice miracle. Backstage, after the show, Miguel sat quietly, still shaking. One of the producers asked, "How do you feel?" He smiled through tears and said softly, "I think my mama's proud of me." Days later, he received messages from around the world. Fans from the US, Europe, even Elvis tribute artists themselves, all praising him. One message stood out: "You didn't just sing like Elvis, you made him live again." When it came time for the live shows, Miguel returned to the AGT stage, this time not as a nervous kid, but as a performer the world already loved. The lights came up, and the crowd erupted even before he sang a note. He smiled, feeling the warmth of thousands of people cheering his name. He wasn't just representing himself now, he was representing every kid who ever dreamed of something bigger. He sang with fire, with heart, with gratitude. The judges looked on proudly, knowing they were witnessing something special. When the performance ended, Simon said, "You're proof that music has no borders, no language, no limit." The audience chanted his name. "Miguel! Miguel!" He bowed deeply, his eyes full of tears, his heart full of love. After the show, reporters asked him what he'd do next. He said, "I'll keep singing, I'll keep dreaming, and I'll never forget where I came from." Months later he returned home to Manila. The airport was packed with people holding banners that said, "Welcome home, Filipino Elvis." Cameras flashed, kids screamed, families waved flags. His mother stood in the crowd crying, holding a bouquet of flowers. When he saw her, he ran straight into her arms. The crowd cheered louder than ever. In the following weeks, murals of him began to appear across the city, his smiling face beside Elvis Presley's painted with the words, "Two kings, one spirit." Everywhere he went, people asked him to sing, and he always did. Not for fame, not for money, but because music was his way of giving back. He would often say, "I don't want to be Elvis. I just want to be me." A Filipino boy who believed. And that belief changed everything. The world called him the Filipino Elvis. But those who truly knew him called him something else. The boy who made the king proud. His story became a symbol of hope. That no matter where you come from, no matter how small your voice feels, if you sing with truth, the world will listen. Even Simon Cowell, in later interviews, mentioned him. "There are some performances that stay with you forever," Simon said. "That boy, that one, he reminded us what real talent means." And so every time someone replays that clip online, every time the confetti falls on screen, you can almost hear the whisper of Elvis himself, smiling somewhere, saying, "Well done, kid." Because that day on America's Got Talent, a Filipino boy didn't just sing, he made history. He reminded the world that greatness doesn't need to be born in fame or wealth. Sometimes it's born in a tiny house, under a flickering bulb, where a dream refuses to die. And as the final note fades and the gold confetti drifts down in slow motion, one truth echoes louder than any applause: when you dare to dream, the world will stop and listen.